You were born under a moon, but not every human was. There are old stories, half erased, half whispered, of people who walked this world under a sky with no moon at all. In ancient Greece, the Arcadians called themselves proselenes, those who were here before the moon. In the highlands of what is now Bolivia, the Tiwanaku spoke of a darker night and a new light that appeared in the heavens, long after humans were already here. In Africa, Zulu legends tell of a world wrapped in mist before a bright white eye was dragged into the sky, and the oceans went mad. Different lands, different languages, same forbidden idea. The moon came later. If that was all, you could leave it by the campfire with the other myths. But the sky doesn't get less strange when you stop listening to stories. It gets stranger. Even now, scientists can't agree on how the moon formed. Theories come and go. The origin story keeps getting patched, not fixed. When Apollo missions crashed empty hardware into the surface, the seismometers said the moon rang like a bell. Not for seconds, for hours. Some of its rocks are loaded with titanium and rare metals. Its orbit is almost perfectly circular. It just happens to sit at exactly the right distance to match the sun's size in the sky and carve it out in clean, surgical eclipses. For some, that's coincidence. For others, it became something else. The hollow moon theory, the old Soviet spaceship moon hypothesis, the idea that the moon might be an artificial satellite, a megastructure parked above our heads. And then there's the lore that clings to the first landing. In fringe versions of the Apollo story, people talk about missing minutes of audio, a gap where they say, Neil Armstrong didn't just announce, the eagle has landed, but something closer to, the eagle has landed. There are other craft positioned on the crater rim. In that telling, the astronauts step out and do their checklist. But they're not alone. Up on the edge of the crater, shapes, lights, structures that are clearly not natural rock, and a quiet switch to a secure channel, where whatever they said next never made it into the public transcripts. Officially, it's just rumor. Unofficially, it sounds like the moment they realized they weren't explorers, but intruders walking into someone else's base. That's where the darker ideas grow, that the moon isn't just a machine in the sky, it's part of a system. A cage for something you can't see. A device that, in some tellings, reaches past tides and weather, and all the way into whatever steps out of you when you die. Built to catch, to guide, to loop. Some call it a soul trap. If that's true, you weren't just born under a moon. You were born under something that might be watching every life you live. We'll get there. First, we have to go back to the cultures who remember a world without the moon, to the moment the new light appeared, and to the question nobody was supposed to ask. If the moon was brought here, who built it, and what did they really build it for? If this kind of story pulls at you, leave an offering for the algorithm gods. Hit like and carve your theory into the comments so the circle can find you later. Let's go back to the time before the moon. Chapter 1. The theories that don't fit. On paper, the moon's birth is solved. Ask a textbook and it will give you a confident paragraph, a few diagrams, and a number, 4.5 billion years ago. But if you follow the actual history of moon formation theories, it doesn't feel like a clean origin story. It feels like a story that keeps needing rewrites. First came the capture theory. The moon was a wandering rock. It drifted too close. Earth's gravity grabbed it, End of story. Nice. Simple. Until you look at the orbit. Random captures give you stretched ellipses, crazy tilts, a cosmic bad parking job. Our moon's neat, almost circular path, aligned with Earth's spin, looks less caught and more parked. Then came accretion. Earth and moon formed together. From the same cloud of dust. Twin worlds. If that were true, you would expect similar cores and chemistry. Instead, the moon is light for its size, with far less iron in its heart. Same nursery, different DNA. So we tried fission. Early Earth spins too fast, throws off a chunk of itself, which cools into the moon. Some versions even say that missing chunk became the Pacific Basin. It's a great visual. Until you remember moon rocks are older than the crust at the bottom of our oceans. You can't throw your own skin into space and have it be older than you. Capture, accretion, fission, clever, elegant, and all filed under almost. Then science turned up the drama, the giant impact theory. A Mars-sized body, Theia, slams into early Earth. Both worlds almost die. A ring of molten debris forms. Out of that ring, Earth and Moon reassemble. This one explains a lot. Why the Moon orbits where it does. Why it looks like Earth's outer layers. Why it has so little iron. For a while, this was the answer. Then we looked closer at the isotopes. If the Moon is mostly Theia, its chemical accent should be slightly different from Earth's. Instead, it looks uncannily similar, almost like someone scooped Earth itself and reassembled it nearby. So the model gets tuned, impact angles tweaked, mixing pushed harder, conditions nudged toward just right. When even that feels strained, a new word steps in: synestia. Earth turned into a spinning donut of magma vapor with the moon condensing out near the edge. Bold, visually metal, but the same unease stays. The moon's density still feels off. The orbit still looks too tidy. The whole system still feels positioned. At some point, it stops feeling like we're hunting for the right accident, and more like we're forcing nature to match a blueprint. If this were an artificial lunar megastructure hiding in plain sight, you'd expect exactly this pattern: elegant equations that almost work but never quite land. Then there's the part that doesn't fit politely in the footnotes. Some of the oldest lunar samples date back further than the oldest rocks we've found on Earth's surface. On the timeline carved in stone, the moon looks finished before our planet's current skin even set. Fringe researchers go further and point at the details in those rocks, subtle quirks in elements and isotopes that refuse to line up with a simple, it all melted together once story. It's like staring at a jigsaw puzzle, where the pieces never quite lock the way they're supposed to. So we're left with a shelf of clever models: capture, accretion, fission, giant impact, synestia, all of them smart, all of them tested and reworked, and every time one is crowned the answer. New data slides in from the side and knocks it loose. If the moon is just a natural satellite born out of chaos and gravity, you'd expect at least one story to fit clean. Yes, that's it. That's how you get this orbit, this density, this chemistry. Instead, you get a stack of almosts. For a random rock, that's a lot of almost, which leaves one uncomfortable possibility on the table. Maybe the problem isn't the math. Maybe it's the assumption. Maybe the moon didn't form the way other moons do, because it isn't like other moons. Maybe all these theories feel like fan fiction because they're trying to explain a designed object, using rules written for accidents. If that's true, you don't catch it in origin stories. You catch it by looking at the body itself, how it moves, how it rings, what it's made of, and what refuses to behave like a normal world. That's where the anomalies begin, and that's where the moon starts to look less like a rock and more like a megastructure. Chapter 2. The anomalies no one can explain away. If the origin stories feel like fan fiction, the moon's behavior is the plot hole you can't unsee. Forget how it got here for a moment. Look at what it's doing now. Start with the simplest omen. The sun is about 400 times larger than the moon. The moon is about 400 times closer to us than the sun. So from Earth, they appear almost exactly the same size. Result, those razor-edged solar eclipses, a black disk swallowing a star with millimeter precision. Not close enough. Clean. In a random universe, that's an absurd coincidence. In a world where the moon might be a megastructure, it looks a lot like calibration. If you wanted a satellite to speak with its parent star, in symbols, a young species could see this is how you'd size it. A disk that can neatly carve the sun out of the sky and turn noon into a black ring of fire. Most moons are the size of bruises. Ours is a fist. On paper, the moon's diameter is about a quarter of Earth's, roughly 27% the size of its parent planet. Now compare that with the rest of the neighborhood. Mars' biggest moon is a pebble by comparison, only around 0.3% of Mars. Jupiter's largest moon sits at roughly 3 to 4% of Jupiter's diameter. Saturn's champion moon hovers in the same tiny range. One after another, the big moons of the gas giants line up under 5% of their planets. Then there's us. Earth at one end, a moon at 27%, sitting beside it like a little brother, not a speck. Turn that into a bar chart, and all the other moons cling to the bottom as thin little lines. And the Earth-Moon bar spikes out of the graph like a glitch. Its path is almost perfectly circular, not the stretched, eccentric oval you'd expect from some random captured rock. And it's tidally locked. One face, always staring. Night after night, century after century, the same scars, the same dark Maria, like a mask that never turns away. Gravity can do this over long enough time, but big, neat, obedient is a suspicious combo. From the surface, it looks like a gentle nightlight. From orbit, it looks like a parked eye. This is the part where a normal world would stop surprising you. The moon doesn't. On paper, the moon should be heavier inside. Most large bodies hide their densest stuff, iron, nickel, down in the core. They feel solid in the way a planet should. The moon is different. Its average density is noticeably lower than Earth's, more like a lighter, puffed-out version of a world. But the rocks we brought back from the surface are often denser than the typical crustal rocks under your feet on Earth. Heavier skin, lighter hull. It's as if you picked up a metal safe and found out it weighed less than the wooden table beside it. Something about the inside is missing, or not what we expect. Apollo missions left seismometers on the surface. Then NASA dropped hardware back down. When the Apollo 12 ascent stage slammed into the moon, the seismometers picked up vibrations. That went on for almost an hour. A heavier impact from Apollo 13's third stage made it ring like a bell. For hours, on Earth, seismic waves hit dense, messy layers and die quickly. On the Moon, they traveled long and clean, as if moving through something rigid and layered. Low overall density, heavy surface rocks, and that drawn-out ringing make it hard to see it as just a sleepy, uniform ball of stone. If you built a massive shell with internal supports, buried it in rubble, and then hit it with a hammer, this is roughly the echo you'd expect. Now, look at its face. Impacts of every size have hammered the Moon. Tiny pits, giant basins hundreds of kilometers across. Different objects, different energies, same victim. You'd expect the depths of those craters to scale with the violence that made them. Instead, many of the largest ones seem to hit a limit. Take Gagarin crater on the far side, a wound almost 260 kilometers across, and only around 5 kilometers deep. Over and over, the biggest scars grow wider, but not much deeper. Even the monsters rarely pass a depth of 6 kilometers or so. It's like firing bullets into a mattress. Lying over armor, the surface fluffs up and explodes, but everything stops at the same invisible floor. From orbit, we see the ripped mattress. We don't see what stopped the bullets. If there's a hard layer under that blanket of dust and rock, we're only looking at the dents in its padding. The Moon's dust hides interesting bones. Some Apollo samples are unusually rich in titanium. Strong, light, resistant to corrosion. Others show chromium, zirconium, and assorted metals. That, in the right mix, make excellent structural alloys and heat shields. Fringe researchers go further, pointing to odd isotopes like uranium-236 or neptunium-237. In some lunar material, on Earth, usually linked to nuclear processes, not to quiet geology. Even if you ignore the wildest claims, you're left with this. Parts of the Moon look less like leftovers from a simple magma ball and more like fragments of reinforced shell, slag and plating from something built to survive ages of abuse. Combine that with the density paradox, a light overall body wrapped in heavy, metal-rich skin, and the Moon starts to feel less like a natural planetesimal and more like a husk, engineered to take hits. If you were designing a hull, that had to endure constant micro-meteorite fire and the occasional big impact. This is exactly the shopping list you'd use. Today, the Moon has no global magnetic field, no protective bubble, no planetary dynamo humming inside. And yet, many of the rocks we brought back are strongly magnetized. There are patches of lunar magnetic anomalies, places where, if you held a compass, it would twitch and lie. To magnetize rock, you usually need a strong field at some point in the past. So either the Moon once had a powerful core dynamo that vanished without a trace, or those stones spent time near something else that bent fields around them, reactors, heavy machinery, systems that don't exist on any official diagram of a dead satellite. None of these anomalies alone prove anything. Each one has a paper, a simulation. Maybe it's just this. But stack them and a shape appears. A body too large for its planet, parked at just the right distance for razor-edged eclipses, gliding in a calm, circular path, with one face forever turned toward us. A light, hollow-feeling world that still rings like a bell when struck. with craters that seem to hit a depth ceiling, titanium-rich rocks and strange metals in its bones, and magnetic ghosts lingering in stone from a world with no field. If that's all random, we live next to the luckiest accident in the solar system. If you see it as a parked, reinforced object beside a living planet, the design suddenly makes sense. Tune the orbit and size for tides and eclipses. Lock one face toward the surface. Hide a tough shell under a thick cushion of dust. Let it pass as a dead rock. On the outside, you get just a moon. On the inside, you might have something else tuned, reinforced, armored, watching. And if it was placed here on purpose, the next question isn't how. It's why. To stabilize Earth, to protect it, to monitor it, or to do something no one at the surface was meant to understand. To chase that, we have to look at what the old stories say happened when the moon arrived, not just in the sky, but in the oceans. Chapter 3, When the Moon Arrived. If the moon really came late, it shouldn't just change the sky. It should wreck the world. Some old stories say it did. In one Zulu legend, before the moon, the world sat under a kind of water vapor canopy. Not normal clouds. A permanent veil in the sky. Soft light, gentle climate, no brutal seasons. Nights were dark, but it was a deep, muffled darkness, like being inside a giant dim room, where fires glowed low and shadows never quite sharpened. Then, the moon was brought. In some versions, two powerful beings drag a white orb into the heavens and fix it above the earth. It doesn't slowly evolve into place. It's installed, and when that happens, the ceiling breaks. The vapor in the sky collapses. What used to hang above as mist falls as rain. Not a storm, a tipping. Rain that doesn't stop. Rivers leave their beds. Valleys drown. People on the coasts watch the shoreline vanish. Animals climb to higher ground and find the hills already crowded. Families huddle on the last dry ridges, clutching bundles that used to be homes. The world gets a new word: flood. In that memory, the moon is not a decoration. It's a trigger. You don't see it from the beach, but oceans are obsessed with gravity. Right now, the moon is their metronome. Tides rise and fall to its silent pull, add a massive new body to a planet's sky. And the water goes through a personality crisis. Tides intensify, coastlines change, currents reorganize. If that happened while humans were watching, they wouldn't talk about tidal forces. They'd say, when that new light appeared, the seas went mad. Zulu memory ties the moon to a flood. In Bolivia, Tiwanaku whispers talk about a new light in a time of chaos. Other cultures remember a sky change and a deluge arriving together. Stories told around fires, with older voices lowering when they reach the part where the water doesn't stop rising. Children listen with salt still on their skin, as if the sea has followed them inland. Different words, same shape. Now zoom out. Around 12,000 years ago, Earth's climate suddenly snapped. We call it the Younger Dryas. Temperatures crashed back toward Ice Age levels, then rebounded in a sharp spike. Ice sheets melted fast. Seas rose. Weather turned violent in a geological instant. Science blames shifting currents, maybe an impact, a complex chain of natural events. Fringe retellings quietly drop something else into that window: the moon. A world in delicate balance, then a new satellite in a tight orbit, and the system slams into a different mode. If the moon is natural, the overlap is just a weird rhyme. If it's a placed object, the younger Dryas looks like the moment. Someone hit apply changes. Look at what the moon does for Earth now. It keeps our planet's tilt on a shorter leash, so seasons don't go feral. It stirs the oceans and sculpts tides. It sets a firm rhythm to night and day. From one angle, lucky accident. From another, planetary tuning. Imagine an unstable Earth with a softer sky, calmer, less stressed seas, a wobblier axis. Then imagine a civilization that wants something else. Sharper seasons, stronger mixing in the oceans, a more stable spin, a different sky. You don't rewrite the planet from the ground up. You hang a solution next to it. You install a moon. The myths don't talk about the birth of the moon. They talk about the moment it took over, the sky breaks, the water moves. The world gets harder. If that's even half true, the moon isn't just scenery. It's an intervention. And once you see it that way, you can't stop at, what did it do to water? You have to ask, what is it doing now? Because for something that's supposed to be dead, the moon still twitches. Chapter 4. Is the moon still alive? The moon keeps blinking. For something that's supposed to be cold and finished, it still twitches. Astronomers have been staring at the moon for centuries. Every so often, someone sees something that shouldn't be there. A flash, a glow, a patch that brightens or changes color for a few seconds or a few minutes, and then goes back to normal like nothing happened. They even have a name for it: transient lunar phenomena. Between the 1500s and the late 1900s, hundreds of these reports were recorded. Red or pink glows in a crater, mists that seem to form and dissipate, brief sparkles like welding arcs on the dark edge of night and day. If you're feeling charitable, you call it dust, reflections, eyes playing tricks. If you're not, it starts to sound like a machine that occasionally turns something on. One of the favorite places for these glitches is a dark oval near the moon's northern half, Plato crater. Over and over, observers have reported a faint, shifting mist, pooling inside it, a glowing haze, sometimes brighter, sometimes dimmer, then gone. The moon is supposed to be airless, no weather, no clouds. And yet Plato has a reputation for looking like it's exhaling. Call it an illusion if you like. Seen another way, Plato isn't just a crater, it's a vent. Then there's Aristarchus. Even in an ordinary telescope, this crater looks wrong. It's bright, too bright. One of the most reflective spots on the moon. Every few years, someone catches it doing something else, glowing, pulsing, shining with a strange blue or violet hue people started calling the blue gem. Photographs show it lit up like a tiny reactor in the middle of a dead plane. Official explanations talk about gas releases, electrical effects, tricks of contrast. Maybe, or maybe Aristarchus is exactly what it looks like. A node that still gets power from time to time. A status light. On a system we're not supposed to read. The moon's surface is scarred with more than craters. If you look closely at some high-resolution images, you see something else: trails. Long, thin lines in the dust, with a boulder sitting at the end, like the punctuation mark on a sentence. We're told those rocks simply broke off a slope and rolled down. Fair enough, until you find tracks that don't behave. Trails that seem to go on for miles. tracks that kink and turn, lines that appear to go uphill before stopping. No wind, no water, no one pushing, just rocks that, at some point, decided to move. Something under the surface shifts. The ground trembles. Objects on top slide. From here, it looks like a wandering boulder. From there, it might look like a maintenance issue. The seismometers the Apollo missions left behind did more than catch impact rings. They also recorded moonquakes. Some are shallow, likely caused by temperature changes, as the surface bakes in sunlight and then freezes in shadow. Others are deeper, slow, long-lasting. On one level, you can blame settling and stress, a cooling body creaking as it relaxes. On another, they sound like the groans of something that's been holding its own weight for a very, very long time. A hull flexing, supports shifting, old systems turning in their sleep. Put these together. The moon blinking with brief lights and glows, the mist in Plato, the strange shine of Aristarchus, the blue gem, boulder tracks that don't quite obey gravity. Deep moonquakes on a world that's supposed to be inert. Each one can be dismissed, given a paper, a model, a probably, but they all lean in the same direction. For something declared dead and simple, the moon behaves like an artificial satellite that occasionally boots up. Maybe it's just geology, slow and harmless, or maybe those flashes, mists, tremors, and wandering rocks are the maintenance lights of an old machine, flickering on and off, not fast enough for us to notice. With the naked eye, just enough to remind us it has never been completely asleep. If the moon is a system, the next question is obvious. What was it built to do? Chapter 5, The Moon as a Machine. Monitor, shield, or prison? Up to now, we've treated the moon like a crime scene. The myths say it arrived late. The numbers say it's tuned. The surface acts like armor. The inside rings like structure. Every so often, the dead rock twitches. If you put all that under one word, it's this: system. So what kind of system hangs over a planet? For ages, start with the most obvious design choice. The moon doesn't just sit there. It moves in a way that feels rehearsed. It follows a smooth, almost circular path around Earth. And while the two of us swing together around the sun, the moon turns exactly once per lap. That synchronous rotation means one thing: one face always turned toward Earth. The other face, the far side, permanently hidden from the ground. From down here, you never see what the moon sees. From orbit, it's different. Chinese probes like Chang'e 4 have mapped the far side in detail. In the official photos, craters, basins, rocks, nothing that looks like a sci-fi base. But step back. If you wanted to watch a planet, you wouldn't bolt your hardware onto the roof. Like Christmas lights, you'd bury it, hide it under regolith, spread it through the shell. You'd settle your satellite into a calm, predictable loop, lock its spin to its orbit, so the same side always faces the target, and use the far side for whatever you don't want the target to see. From our point of view, the moon is a one-way mirror. We see the mask. It sees everything. That's the monitor role, a massive, passive-looking object, parked at a chosen distance, permanently staring at the biosphere. We put up GPS and surveillance satellites. After a few decades of electronics, imagine what a civilization, 1 million years ahead, would build. Now, Look at what the moon does, without even trying to hide. It keeps Earth's tilt on a shorter leash. Without a large moon, a planet's axis can wander more over time. Climate swings harder. Winters and summers go feral. Ice ages jump in and out like glitches. With the moon, Earth's tilt stays in a narrower band. Seasons still bite, but they don't rip the world apart every few thousand years. It also acts as a shield, a big target in the sky. Soaks up impacts that might otherwise hit us. Old, scarred face. Younger, relatively clean Earth. You can call that luck. Or you can picture someone hanging, a reinforced body next to a fragile world set to steady its spin and take blows in its place. That's not scenery. That's infrastructure. Terraforming 101. Anchor the tilt. Stir the oceans. Take the hits. Let life crawl out of the water and start building cities without resetting the planet every time. The sky throws a rock. If the moon is a machine, this is its gentle side guardian. Gyroscope, crash barrier, but there's a darker way to read the same design. Think of a prison yard. The walls keep the weather off you. The towers watch what you do. Helpful if you forget what the building is for. The moon as shield can easily become the moon as fence. It stabilizes the environment just enough to keep the system running. It watches the entire surface with one unblinking face. It sits where every radio wave, every beam of light, every nuclear flash crosses its line of sight. From that perspective, the moon isn't just protecting life, it's containing it. You don't need lasers or tractor beams. You just need a world so tightly tuned that the creatures on it never leave. Most never even look up and ask why there's a tower in the middle of their sky. So pick your version: a monitor patiently watching a young civilization grow, a stabilizer making sure climate and tides stay within parameters, a shield catching the worst of the debris so the experiment doesn't get wiped out too early, or a cage is a silent warden that keeps the farm running, the game stable, the pieces on the board. In all four roles, the hardware looks the same: a big reinforced shell with a suspiciously light interior, set close, its motion finely tuned, armored just beneath the dust. The only thing that changes is the intention behind it. If it's an artificial megastructure, someone built it. And whoever that was, some of the oldest stories don't point to gods or distant aliens, but to something much closer. Before we talk about what a machine like that might do to souls, we have to look at the records that quietly claim we were the ones who built the moon. Chapter 6. The Builders in the Records. There is one more type of story that clings to the moon. Not we feared it, not we prayed to it, we made it. In 9th century China, a strange little book called Yu Yang Zazu collects curiosities and rumors, like fireflies in a jar. One of them begins in the mountains. Two men, Zheng Renben and his cousin, a scholar named Wang, are traveling in the Song Mountains, a thick tangle of forest and stone. The light dies faster than they expect. Paths split and vanish. The valley closes around them like a throat. Just as night is about to win, they see him, a man in white, lying in the grass, as if he fell asleep in the middle of eternity. They call out for directions. No answer. They call again. Nothing. Only on the third or fourth try. does he sit up slowly, like someone surfacing from a very deep dream. He waves them closer. Up close, he looks ordinary and wrong at the same time. Clothes too clean for the mountain eyes that don't quite match his age. They ask where he's from. He doesn't name a village. Instead, he says, "Did you know the moon is made from 7 kinds of precious materials? It's shaped like a pellet. The bright areas you see are where sunlight hits its raised surfaces." Then the sentence that doesn't belong on any normal hike. "A long time ago, 82,000 households worked together to build the moon, and I was part of one of them." He opens his bundle. Inside are tools, chisels, axes. Not bronze, not iron, but described as if cut from jade. Beside them, a meal, rice mixed with powdered jade, glittering like someone tried to cook starlight. He offers it to them. "It won't make you immortal," he says, "but you'll never fall ill again." They eat. He points them toward a path. That shouldn't exist in a place that lost. When they turn back to thank him, he's gone. No footprints, no bed in the grass, just the memory of a man who claimed to be a moon builder. After that, Chinese poems and stories start dropping strange phrases. Jade axe for building the moon. Households that raised the lunar tower. You can treat it as pure fantasy, a folk tale about immortals and alchemy, or you can look at it the way we've been looking at Sumerian lists and flood myths, not as instruction manuals, but as corrupted memories. A rumor that, in some prehistoric era, when human technology ran far ahead of ours, we reached up and modified the sky. Maybe we didn't lift the whole moon from nothing. Maybe we skinned it, armored it, hollowed it, turned it into a device. And when that cycle collapsed, the details rotted, leaving behind only fragments, jade tools, precious metals, tens of thousands of households building the moon. If even one shard of that is true, then the thing above us isn't just an alien machine. It might be our own forgotten work. And if we once had the power to hang a second world in the sky, the next question isn't just who built it, but what they built it to do to us, to our bodies, and to whatever steps out of them when they finally fall silent. That's where the darkest version of the story begins. Chapter 7. The Soul Trap Hypothesis. The light at the end of the tunnel. So far, we've treated the moon like a machine for tides, climate, and control. Maybe a device someone built or modified long before our history starts. Now we walk into the version of the story where it isn't built for oceans at all. It's built for you. Almost every culture has some version of this. A body dies. The world narrows. There is darkness. Then a light, a tunnel, a door, a bright opening full of warmth and voices. Relatives waiting. Guides. Beings of light. They tell you the same thing. Don't be afraid. Come with us. Go into the light. Most people hear that and think comfort. A passage home, a return. In a certain corner of modern law, they hear something else. A script. A procedure running. Not a welcome, a funnel. You can picture it. A woman in a hospital bed, machines flatlining. Her awareness peels away, watching doctors from the ceiling, then slowly turning toward a glowing mouth in the sky, calling her by name. Here, Earth is not a school or a random rock. It's a loop. At the moment of death, your awareness steps out. You see the tunnel. You see the light. You see the ones you desperately want to trust. You move toward them, and that's the point. Not to free you, to put you back in circulation. The guides walk you through your life, show you what you did wrong, offer you another chance. You agree because what else do you do? In front of a blazing presence, calling itself love? Then comes the flash, the fall, the next body. Memories wiped, same farm, different stall. In this reincarnation trap vision, the system doesn't feed on obedience or belief, but on something simpler: experience, emotion. The charge of 1 billion lives, burning through the same narrow script, lifetime after lifetime. Now plug the moon into it. In one strand of occult lore, there's a kind of Saturn-moon matrix. In that picture, Saturn is the main tower, a slow, heavy broadcaster. The moon is the local relay, reflecting and modulating signals down to Earth. The grid between them shapes perception, keeps the rule set of reality tight, and makes sure the reincarnation loop stays closed. The moon, in that case, is not just a monitor or shield. It's part of an astral infrastructure, a white, dead-looking device that listens for the moment a consciousness jumps out of its body and then shines something back. The tunnel, the light, the script. Come here, this way, don't look around too much, don't remember too much. Step into the beam. You think you're going home? You're just going through intake. Ask why anyone would build something so obscene, and the answers don't get nicer. Control. Keep a species on one planet. Keep it busy, keep it small-minded. Reset it every lifetime, so it never remembers what it really is. Harvest of pain, fear, desire, relief, all the sharp edges of human experience, stacked and multiplied through millions of cycles. We harvest fields. They harvest lives, not bodies, not blood. Loops. If that sounds too dark, good. It's meant to taste wrong. This is the ugliest possible interpretation of a moon that looks too perfect and an afterlife script that looks too rehearsed. Imagine looking up from a battlefield, bleeding out under a sky split by smoke, and feeling, just before everything goes black, that something above you is waiting for the moment you let go. In near-death accounts, people sometimes say they saw stars, a vast space, a sphere of light. Imagine, just for a second, that the sphere isn't abstraction. It's a familiar shape, a round, pale thing that has been above you every night of your life, watching you age, waiting for your last exhale. When the body stops, your awareness rises. You see the tunnel. You see the glow. You move toward it like a moth drawn to the one lamp. That's always been there. From here, it's the moon. From the inside, in this telling, it's the processing center, the ultimate customs office for souls. You go in, you come out the other side, crying in a hospital, dragged back through a mother's body, covered in light again, but this time from fluorescent tubes. No memory, just a vague sense that something didn't add up. In the darker vision, you could stand outside Earth and see it all at once. Millions of tiny lights, human lives snapping off like candles, lifting toward a single cold lantern in the sky and disappearing into it, like fireflies into a mouth. You can treat this as a horror folktale, written for the age of spaceflight. But notice how it feels, not like aliens landing or governments lying. More personal, more intimate. A machine in the sky that isn't aimed at armies or borders, but at your exit. The eerie part isn't the architecture, it's the familiarity. The moon has always been tied to sleep madness, dreams, lunacy cycles, blood, memory. This theory just pushes it one step further. It doesn't just watch your nights, it waits for your last one. And if the moon is part of a system like that, if there's even a fragment of truth inside the nightmare, then whatever humans found there, when we finally went up in person, was never going to be shown on television. That's where we go next. To the missing minutes, the erased tapes, and the moments when the people who actually touched the moon came back looking like they'd seen something they weren't allowed to describe. Chapter 8. What we lost. Missing tapes, missing minutes, missing answers. If the moon is just a rock, the story of us landing on it should be simple. We went. We filmed everything. We kept the evidence. That's not what happened. On July 20th, 1969, humans walked on the moon for the first time. The signal from Apollo 11's cameras didn't go straight to your grandparents' TV. It was first recorded in a special high-quality format on slow-scan videotapes at ground stations in places like Australia. Those original tapes would have been the clearest record of the first steps on another world. They don't exist anymore. Years later, NASA admitted the original Apollo 11 tapes were erased and reused, recorded over, to save money and storage space. The most important video in human history, wiped like an old sitcom. We're left with converted, lower-quality copies, a recording of a recording, the ghost of an image. Officially, it was bureaucracy and short-sightedness. No conspiracy, just humans being careless with our own legend. Unofficially, it feels wrong. If you found out a museum had painted over the Mona Lisa to reuse the canvas, you'd look at the director differently. Now imagine that canvas was the first clear view of the moon through human eyes. There's another shadow on Apollo 11, the story that for a couple of minutes we weren't hearing everything. In fringe versions of the mission audio, ham radio enthusiasts and UFO lawkeepers talk about missing minutes, a stretch where the public feed goes quiet. And Armstrong is said to have said something closer to, "The Eagle has landed. There are other craft positioned on the crater rim." In that telling, the astronauts step out and do their checklist. But they're not alone. Up on the edge of the crater, shapes, lights, structures that are clearly not natural rock. Mission Control allegedly switches them to a secure or medical channel. Whatever they said next never appears in the public transcripts. Even among believers, it's admitted as rumor, a piece of lore that lives on late-night radio and message boards. But if you take it at face value, it sounds like the moment they realized. They weren't explorers at all. Just intruders walking into someone else's base. On a dead, empty moon, it's just a spooky story. On an artificial lunar megastructure, it sounds like a line that got cut from the broadcast. Then there are the claims that never made it to prime time. One of the most famous came from an Air Force electronics technician named Carl Wolf. He said that in the late 1960s, while working on imaging equipment, he was shown lunar photographs from the far side of the moon, not public ones, not the pretty catalog shots. He described structures, towers, complexes, geometric shapes that looked manufactured, not carved by impacts. When he asked what they were, the other technician allegedly told him, "We found a base on the backside of the moon." The images he described are nowhere in the public archive.
he told me how everything worked. He showed me the equipment where the digital information came in, where it was converted to photographic images. They were doing 35 millimeter strips of film at that time, which were then assembled into 18.5 by 11 inch mosaics, they were called. There was a digital signature and a grayscale on every 35 millimeter strip. And those strips were from successive passes around the moon. And they would take and build up a photograph. They would scan one section of the moon, then another and another, and then they would get a larger image. So this mosaic then would be put in that contact printer, and that was then a print that was issued to whomever, the press, the scientist, whatever, wherever that was intended to go. So he was showing me how all this worked, and we walked over to one side of the lab, and he said, by the way, we've discovered a base on the back side of the moon. And I said, whose? What do you mean, whose? He said, yes, we've discovered a base on the back side of the moon. And at that point, I became frightened, and I was a little terrified, thinking to myself that if anybody walks in the room now, I know we're in jeopardy, we're in trouble, because he shouldn't be giving me this information. I was fascinated by it, but I also knew that he was overstepping a boundary that he shouldn't be stepping over. And then he pulled out one of these mosaics and showed this base, which had geometric shapes. There were towers, there were spherical buildings, there were very tall towers, and things that looked somewhat like radar dishes, but they were large structures. So I didn't say any more to him, because I was concerned again that somebody was going to come in at any moment, would catch us having this conversation, and we would be in real trouble. I realized that he was telling me this information because he didn't have anybody else to talk to. Now, probably in that laboratory, he was probably one of the few enlisted people, and he was a worker bee. And he had a high-level security clearance, obviously, but he couldn't share that information with anybody else. And in those days, we didn't. When you had your security clearance, you took it seriously. It isn't like today where people don't take these things seriously. We had a different set of morals and ethics and values. That's the way we were raised, and we stayed bound by those agreements. So it was rare that someone would do something like this, but this fellow and I were the same rank. I think he was very distressed. He had the same pallor and demeanor as the scientists outside the room. They were just as concerned as he was, and he needed to discuss it with somebody. So that was the end of it right there. I didn't take it any further than that. I just filed it away. But the interesting thing, every day that I went home, I would think to myself, I can't wait to hear about this on the news, And, so I'd turn on the TV and I'd look at the news to see if they're going to announce, we've discovered a base on the backside of the moon, being really naive, And, of course, here it is 30-some years later, and we still haven't heard about it.
True or not, his story joined the pattern missing original tapes, whispers of missing minutes, a technician claiming he saw something impossible. That then vanished from the record. One accident is nothing. A chain of disappearances starts to feel like policy. Watch the Apollo 11 press conference.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Manned Spacecraft Center. This is the Apollo 11 press conference. The format today will consist of a 45-minute presentation by the Apollo 11 crew, followed by question and answers. At this time, I'd like to introduce the Apollo 11 crew, astronauts Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, Edwin Aldrin. Neil?
It was our pleasure to have participated in one great adventure. It's an adventure that took place not just in the month of July, but rather one that took place in the last decade. We all here and the people listening in today had the opportunity to share that adventure over its developing and unfolding in the past months and years. It's our privilege today to share with you some of the details of that final month of July that was certainly the highlight for the three of us of that decade. We're going to divert a little bit from the format of past press conferences and talk about the things that interested us most, in particular the things that occurred on and about the moon. We will use a number of films and slides which most of you have already seen, and with the intent of pointing out some of the things that we observed on the spot which may not be obvious to those of you who are looking at them here from the surface of Earth.
Three men who just did the impossible sit on a stage. They should look like the world's conquering heroes. They look small, tired, guarded, like people who went somewhere they can't quite describe, in a language they're allowed to use. Their answers are careful. Their eyes are not rock star eyes. You can chalk it up to exhaustion, pressure, the weight of history. Or you can entertain the darker read. They saw more than they were permitted to say, while the microphones were on. Not aliens waving from a crater. Not a glowing reactor core. Maybe just a sense that the place they'd been standing on was not what they'd been told it was. A shell, a machine, something that had been watching them, long before they watched it. After Apollo 17 in 1972, no human has walked on the moon again. 5 decades, countless technological leaps, reusable rockets, robotic probes everywhere, no boots on that dust. Official reasons? Budget, politics, priorities shifting to stations, shuttles, Mars talk. Unofficially, the question hangs. If the moon is harmless, why leave it alone so long? If it's not, what did we bump into? That made the most powerful nations on Earth quietly step away. A bare, lifeless rock doesn't need erased tapes, side-channel rumors, missing photos, and a 50-year pause. You only hide things when there's something to hide, something up there. Warranted redactions, rewinds, and men who came home, looking smaller than when they left. Whatever the truth is, it's not in the tapes they erased. It's not in the clips they cleaned up for TV. It's somewhere between the static, the missing frames, and the expressions on the faces of men who walked on something that might not have been a moon at all. Which brings us to the last piece, not what the moon does, not what it might be, but what it means to live your entire life under a presence in the sky you were taught was a stone, and what you do with that. The next time its light falls across your window. Final chapter. Look up differently. Tonight, if the sky is clear, step outside for a moment. Don't look at the stars. Don't search for constellations. Find the moon. The same face you've seen in 1,000 childhood memories. The same pale disk that sat above your first heartbreak, your first cigarette, your first night you couldn't sleep. It looks harmless, soft, distant. Now overlay what you know. Old mountain people in Greece, calling themselves before the moon. Highland ruins in Bolivia, whispering about a darker sky. That gained a new light mid-story. Zulu fireside legends of a water canopy collapsing, when a white eye was dragged into place, and the world drowned a satellite that is too large, too orderly cut exactly for eclipses, an orbit that feels placed, not just caught, a body that rings when you hit it, crater scars that stop at an invisible flaw, titanium and strange metals in its bones, craters that blink and flare, blue glows where the surface should be dark, boulders that seem to walk across dust no wind has ever touched, erased tapes, rumors of missing minutes, images some technicians swear they saw, and we never did. A machine that might steady your seasons, shield you from impacts, watch your oceans, and, in the darkest stories humans tell, stand at the end of your life and shine a light in your face, just when you are most willing to follow. Anything that feels warm. You don't have to decide what's true, you only have to accept that the thing hanging above you is not simple. It might be a miracle of accidents, a natural object that just happens. To sit at the right distance, with the right size, doing all the right things, for life to bloom underneath it. Or it might be the oldest piece of technology you will ever see with your own eyes. Maybe it's an artificial lunar megastructure, an alien-built machine hiding in plain sight, a stabilizer, a monitor, a shield, a cage, a lighthouse for souls, a dead god's forgotten machine. You will never touch it. You may never know, but you can refuse to see it as background. The next time moonlight spills across your floor, treat it like a message. Maybe from the universe, maybe from whoever hung that cold lantern there, maybe from the version of you that remembers a darker sky and can't quite say why it misses it. Look at it a little too long. Let the unease sit in your chest. Let the question form, even if you never say it out loud. What are you really? That's all this circle asks of you. Not belief, not worship, just the willingness to look at the most familiar thing in the sky and admit that you don't know it at all. If you want to keep walking into stories like this, the ones that make the world feel strange again, leave an offering for the algorithm gods, drop a like, carve your theory into the comments, and subscribe to the Obsidian Circle so you don't wander out of it by accident. And tonight, when the lights are off and the room is quiet, let a bit of that pale glow in. Don't be surprised if it feels less like moonlight and more like something looking back.